All right, time for a little trim routing. Always helps to have the right tool for the job. I'm going to peel this sandpaper off this block here and fold it in half, and come in here and knock this edge. I could have maybe taken that 1/8 inch round over bit, and when this was clamped up, run it on around here, and maybe I actually should have. Well, you know what they say about hindsight. This is also a good way of knocking the edge off. You just want to break that sharp edge. This isn't as critical as on top where somebody's going to be running their fingers around, or I should say proper grammar, his or her fingers. Normally the router leaves a little bit of a fuzz around the edge, doesn't really make a real smooth cut, even if it's sharp, because the way it raises the wood fibers on the cross grain. So I normally take a piece of sandpaper and do like I'm doing here, just hand sand it, smooth it up. Sanding is real important, even though it's a tedious job, because you want your piece to be inviting to the touch. And if something is rough, you don't want people to go, ow, and have a splinter or something. I don't know if you remember the cobbler shop in Wadsworth. Cobblers have kind of gone the way of buggy whip manufacturers, being that shoes are so cheap and they're no longer made in the United States. But I remember going in there when I was younger with my mom, and she would take shoes in there to get resoled or repaired. And that man had a sign on the wall, and I'll see if I can quote it. It said something along the lines of, "The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweet taste of low price is gone." That's something I have to remember, that if I do a bad job, it's going to provide me with bad references. And for some reason, human nature likes to spread bad news either rather than good news, or more easily than good news. So I want to make sure I've got a piece as close to perfection as possible, and I'll talk about that later in my closing comments, because it's been something I've been thinking about during this time of this project here. I'm also going to knock this edge here. And remember, I said if I had any little discrepancies, I was going to work them out with a piece of sandpaper too. Like I said, when I go to seal this top, I'm going to tape this whole inside off, and maybe I'll just cut a piece of cardboard, just something so that the sanding sealer doesn't get on here, because sanding sealer is not really made to be built up. You're supposed to do one coat and then top coat it with either, well, depending on how much solids are in the finish, you go 1 or 2 coats. I normally do just a sanding sealer and 1 coat, because I use such a high solids finish. And when I spray, I like to lay it on, which means, get it to the upper extreme of the allowable coating thickness. That gives a real nice feel, especially on oak. You get a good solid couple coats on there, and it really kind of fills in the grain almost. And some people don't like the feel of that open grain. I don't really care for it all that much myself, which is why I like cherry and walnut so well. I mean, one of the reasons. There. Okay. I've got that rounded off, sanded. I'm going to just go around this edge here too, because sometimes the bearing will leave a little, excuse me, a little scratch, and it'll leave a shiny spot on the edge, so I'll hit that real quick too here. You'll notice I left my final sanding, the stroking out, for last. That's also because sometimes the router base will leave a little burr. If, heaven forbid, one of the screws that hold the base on is sticking down a little bit or something, and you'll leave a scratch on the way around. So it's always good to leave one final sanding before you go to the finishing. There, that's good. Okay. I'm going to turn the lights back on now. Let's see. That's the one I want. I'll stop this so this doesn't get too long.